Welcome to a new story about the end of the world. This video has about the weirdest apocalypse you could think of. One day, our planet may become completely overgrown with food. And the problem is, it could happen a lot sooner than you held possible. It will be some end. Suddenly, there will be grain everywhere. Grain in the countryside. Grain on the beaches. Grain shooting up along every road. In your backyard, grain. Popping up from the cracks in sidewalks, more grain. Everywhere you look and everywhere you go, grain, grain, grain. Now if that isn't a green revolution, what is? Of course, there'll be plenty to eat. But there's a drawback: bread will also be the only thing around. The grain will overrun all other crops. Agriculture will be disrupted. Forests and grasslands will be demolished. Slowly the entire food chain breaks down, as the face of the planet turns into an endless field of waving grain. Governments will speak of the grain problem and cook up plans to push the grain back. But the grain won't listen. Suddenly, mankind finds itself in trouble. Diseases emerge, people go blind or develop brittle bones, all because of the one-sidedness of their diet. And then there are the side effects. Every now and then, suffocating grain dust tempests sweep over the planet. Incredible grain field fires occasionally burn down a country or two. Entire continents dry up, as the grain sips up all the water. The atmosphere, having to deal with the grain dust, the smoke from the grain fires and the lack of water, will get messed up. There may be an ice age, or even a kind of nuclear winter. It isn't very hard to see what it all boils down to. Humanity is thrown back into the Stone Age. Well, grain age is a more accurate word. So next time you have a slice of bread, just remember, one day, bread could do us all in. Sounds far-fetched? Sorry, but it isn't, not at all. The grain we're dealing with here is just the next species of grain. We're talking super grain here, grain that is genetically modified. Already there are hundreds of genetically modified, GM, crops around. The idea is quite simple. Genes define the properties of everything that grows and lives. So in genetic engineering, what you basically do is take a crop, add a gene here, take out a gene there, and there you have it, a new species of grain, with some handy new properties. Genetic engineering is quite cool, really. You can make super maize that's resistant to certain diseases, so you don't have to spray all those polluting pesticides over them. You can create a new brand of super rice that is nutritious enough to feed even the poorest country. Heck, you can even piece together a super apple that protects your teeth from rotting. Or a super potato that survives frost. A super tomato that grows in salt water. If you think that sounds too weird to be true, don't look now, all these crops already exist today. Of course, governments and genetic companies are cautious. You just don't want your new breed of super crop to accidentally mix up with the common stuff. Genes pass from one generation to the next. So if you mix up genetically modified crops with common crops, in no time you'll only have the GM species left, GM crops having a huge evolutionary advantage over the ordinary stuff. Still, this leaking of GM crops into normal nature is exactly what is happening as we speak. In China, where there's little government control over GM farming, the so-called golden rice is rapidly replacing common rice. Millions of farmers worldwide grow GM crops, occupying millions of hectares of farmland. Meanwhile, in the West, every now and then an accident happens. In Canada, genetically altered oilseed rape escaped from the test fields into the countryside. Right now, super oilseed rape is shooting up everywhere in Canada. And in Mexico, genetically altered super maize suddenly showed up. This really baffled everyone. Mexico has banned all GM farming years ago. So, it only seems reasonable to conclude that one day, most crops on the planet will be genetically tinkered with in one way or the other. Okay, so what, you may ask? As long as it tastes good, there's no need to worry, right? Well, there are these disturbing risks. One day soon, we may create a true super crop that is utterly resistant to disease and pollution, and is able to grow in literally every environment. A crop like that might take over the countryside in no time and start haunting us. Your beloved new crop will turn out a pain in the ass, an ineradicable superweed. No deterrent will kill it, no climate will stop it. There you have it, the grain problem. And of course, we said grain only for argument's sake. It could be soy or maize, or rice. Or raspberries, tomatoes, cucumber or lychees, whatever you can think of. Oh, and of course it would be rather inconvenient if of all crops the super crop that conquers the world turns out to be cotton. What would we have to eat? Cotton cookies, perhaps? And wait, what about contraceptive corn? In early 2002, the San Diego-based biotech company Epicite developed a new breed of GM corn that can be used as a contraceptive. The corn kills the sperm cells of men that eat it, rendering them infertile. Well, you just don't want a crop like that to conquer the world. Humanity would be, fucked. Within 1 or 2 generations, our species would no longer be there. And then there's the remote but rather unpleasant possibility that a GM crop suddenly brings forth some kind of new killer virus or bacterium. No, really. Toying around with a plant's genes may accidentally awaken an inactive, old virus that lays buried deep within the plant's DNA. Just picture that, cheerfully, you go out to harvest your brand new GM crop, but when you get back, your skin has suddenly turned blue with pink dots, due to some incredibly weird and exotic new disease. Just imagine what a bummer that would be. Finally, we've created a crop that is so totally perfect that you can grow it anywhere you like. Well, except you can't eat it, it's growing all over the place, and it makes you ill or infertile. It would be the biggest joke in history. And, probably, the last.